Hello Year 10, welcome back to your next living room / greenhouse room lessons. We're continuing our coast topic and we are specifically continuing having a look at the different types of management. But we're going to be having a look at very different types of management today. And what you will need is your exercise book, pen and ruler, your phone and page 159 of the textbook. Now remember, you can now all access the textbook using the Hodder website, which your teachers all will have sent you a link on. If you have not signed up and got your account for it, please make sure you do that today. Go back through your emails or ask your teacher, although I'm sure I won't be very happy to have to send it out to you again because you have all had it before, but maybe the other teachers might be nicer. Who knows? I'm not. So, as normal, here's your jockey memory. 3 quick questions. Name 3 hard engineering strategies. Explain the formation of an arch, stack and stump. And what are the benefits of Preston Park for leisure users? So scan the QR code and go and have a go at these 3 quick questions so we can see how you're all doing. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're still having a look at coastal management today, but we're having a look at the other side of it, because last lesson we were having a look at the hard engineering strategies. So we were looking at the large-scale man-made structures that are often put in place on a coastline to try and protect it. But what we're going to be doing today is having a look at a more softer, more natural approach called soft engineering. So title in your books today is Coastal Management Soft Engineering. Please can you make sure you all write that in, underline it with a ruler. So as I mentioned, soft engineering is reducing the process of coastal erosion, but using more natural methods. So not using this hard engineering, but using more natural, softer strategies. So the first thing you're going to do, as I'm sure you can all guess, is pause this video and copy down this key term, highlight it, make it really clear. It's really important you know the difference between hard and soft engineering. So we're back with our favourite guys, the Time for Geography videos again. They are brilliant and they can take you to a coastline which I'm not brave enough to take you down to Brighton Beach yet on my tripod, so they can show you coastlines much better than me. So what I'd like you to do first of all is watch this video about soft engineering strategies on the beach, and then I would like you to copy out these 3 different types of coastal soft engineering strategies, but I want you to match up the name of the strategy to what it is, okay? So these are not in order. You need to draw lines and match them up or just write them out with the correct definition next to them. I will go through the answers in a moment. Okay, so we've got our 3 pictures here also to help us, which I didn't realise, which is lovely. So in terms of beach replenishment is when sediment lost by erosion is replaced from other sources. So they do a lot of this on Brighton Beach actually, but they can do it with sand or with pebble beaches, where often they will get more sediment. Often they'll get it from just a little bit out to sea and they'll get it off the seabed and then they put it on the beach. So they're basically building the beach. Beach stabilisation is planting dead trees in the sand to make it more stable and less likely to erode away. So by planting plants within the soil, often they will grow roots. The roots will then bind the soil together. They'll create a bit of moisture. They'll make sand dunes more stable. And wetland creation is areas between the land and the sea is allowed to flood naturally by the tides. So wetlands are a brilliant natural sea defence that is already there. But often we're building on them or we're building seawalls. But a softer management strategy would be to just let them flood, let it happen, because actually they're a brilliant natural buffer zone between kind of the coast and where humans are living. So these are our first 3 soft engineering strategies, and we're going to have a look at them in a little bit more detail. So I've mentioned about this idea of creating wetlands, and this links into one of our shoreline management plans, which was to retreat the line. So in order to retreat the line, a coastline will undergo the process of managed realignment, which is creating more of these intertidal wetland zones as a natural buffer. So it acts as a natural buffer during the storms, it soaks up wave energy, and it means that more valuable land behind this area is going to be protected from a natural source. And as I've mentioned that they're known as wetlands, but we also call them the intertidal zone. Now the intertidal zone is a zone that is exposed at low tide but holds a large amount of water at high tide. So if we're thinking about intertidal zones, there's one which I'm sure lots of you know about, which is as you go out to Shoreham, as you're going through Shoreham High Street and heading towards the beach, you go over that big bridge, it's all lovely and beautiful around you, but that area underneath the bridge is an intertidal zone, because at low tide, the water completely disappears, and we have all of these kind of marshes, we have sand, and then at high tide, as the water rises, that area holds the water and it prevents Shoreham and the surrounding area from being destroyed. So what I want you to do first of all is copy down two key terms for me. So the first one is our managed realignment and the second one is the intertidal zone. So just briefly copy down these two key terms, highlight them for you, and we're going to go into a bit more detail. So what we're going to think about now is how they will do this process of managed realignment. So what I've got on the board is the 5 steps in recreating these wetlands and allowing the intertidal zone to become this natural buffer again. I've put the first and the last steps in, but the second, third and fourth are down here. So copy this table out and I want you to put these 3 into the correct order for me as to how they do this managed realignment. You might want to have a look at page 157 of the online textbook and you will be able to see some answers to help you there, but I will go through them. So our answers are, so obviously the first step is they will punch holes through old earth embankments on the shoreline. So whether that's through an old seawall, they might punch holes in it. This then allows the seawater to move slowly across the land at high tide. They don't completely destroy the sea defences because then there would just be this sudden surge of water and that would be terrible. So they punch these holes so just a small amount will go across the land at high tide. And because of the slow movement, it will deposit lots and lots of mud. So as the tide comes in and out and in and out, it will deposit lots and lots of mud. As it then flows back out again, within all of this mud, we'll get these kind of tidal creeks. So these small little streams, little flows of water moving through, creating smaller channels. This process then creates natural mudflats and salt marshes, which will store a lot of water and act as a buffer to the erosion. Okay, so our next strategy is through using sand dunes. So sand dunes, again, are a natural feature that are already there to protect the coastline. But often we might build on them or destroy them. So through allowing sand dunes to become a more stable part of a coastline, this is another way of using soft engineering to protect the coastline. So what I would like you to do next is I'm going to pause the video in a minute and under a quick heading of sand dunes, I want you to make a very quick sketch of this sand dune system. So within our sand dune system, we obviously have the water and the beach, and then we have 3 kind of separate stages within our sand dune. The bit at the back of the sand dune is obviously the bit that's kind of the most protected, most stable. And the bit towards the front, called the primary section, is where we're going to have the most kind of attack from the sea and from the wind and the salt. So what I want you to do is copy out this diagram, and then for these 3 boxes here, I want you to put them in the correct part of your diagram. So at what stage of a sand dune would you expect each of these 3 things to happen? So pause your videos, copy the diagram, and write these 3 things out in the correct order. Here are your answers. So in your primary stage, this is where you have grasses and creepers. There's very dry sand, it's trapped, these are the frontal dunes, it reduces the sand and salt spray onto the further part of the dunes. So this bit at the beginning is probably the most important part because it protects the area behind it. So it's very tolerant of the wind, very tolerant of the salt. You're much more likely to have plants there that don't mind growing in sand, which doesn't have many nutrients in. Behind it, we then have our foredune, where we're likely to have lots of secondary species of plants. So where we're going to have smaller shrubs and some small trees, although they might not live for a long time. So these areas tend to grow very, very quickly, but you again don't have hugely established plants. And then the hind dune is the very, very back bit. And often when you're walking along a place with sand dunes, you don't even realise this back bit is still technically a sand dune. And on here is where you're going to have long life trees. So trees that have been on this beach for a long time. They're very permanent and they are surviving because of the protection they get from these 2, the foredune and the incipient dune. So any areas of houses behind the hind dune are very, very well protected because of this system of sand dunes. So if we were to lose these sand dunes, we would be losing a whole area of protection and the coastline would be able to just retreat further inland. But by encouraging sand dunes and making sure that they're more long lasting, you're much more likely to protect these areas of coast. And then the next strategy, this one I'm not doing anything fancy with, is this idea of beach nourishment. The thing I've told you they do a lot of in Brighton, where they replace the sand, the pebbles, the sediment with sand, pebbles and sediment from out at sea or from other parts of the coastline. So I just very quickly want you to copy down heading, a positive and a negative of this soft engineering strategy. So the positive is it looks natural. It means, I'm sure half of you are sat there thinking, Mr. Smith, you're telling me that the pebbles on the beach aren't natural? No, a lot of them are not. It looks so natural that even you guys are fooled by it. And one of the kind of negatives of it is temporary. It doesn't last a very long time. So at Brighton Beach, they probably do it every 3 or 4 months. They're having to replace the sediment on it because when there are large storms, that sediment is just lost again. So very quickly, pause your videos. Beach nourishment, positive looks natural, negative is temporary. Okay, so what we're moving on to now. So last lesson we looked at hard engineering. First half of this lesson we've had a look at some examples of soft engineering, and then we're going to finish up by having a think about why management is controversial, why there are lots of people for and against it. So the first thing I would like you to do is just very quickly in your books, I want you to write 2 groups that are very for coastal management and 2 groups that are very against it. You could do it as a little T-bar table and have 2 on each side, or you can just write them out as 2 separate little lists. But 2 groups that would be for management and 2 groups that would be against it. So in terms of people who would be very kind of for coastal management, obviously homeowners on that coastline, but also business owners. So maybe holiday parks on the coastline, maybe people who have cafes and restaurants very close to the coastline. They're going to be very, very kind of for protecting the coastline. Whereas some people that might be very, very against it might be people who believe in the earth being kind of untouched. So environmentalists who think that we're altering the coastline. We do have an impact on the ecosystems on these coastlines. So we are having an impact on the biodiversity and the species that might live in that coastline. So obviously they're going to be very against it, and that goes with bird watchers as well, because we might be disturbing where we're putting groins on one beach, further along the coastline where there might be rare species of birds nesting in kind of natural marshlands. They might be losing those marshlands because the groins are blocking the sediment. So things like bird watchers might be very, very against it. Now, one of the strategies I've spoken about today is one of the most controversial, and that is this idea of managed realignment. Now, this is really controversial because often, in order to do this managed realignment, people lose their homes. People lose their homes, they lose their land. Because in the cost-benefit analysis, they might have decided, actually, the cost of protecting this stretch of coastline is not worth what it is worth. So we're just going to let it flood. We're going to break down the barriers. We're not going to replace them, and we're going to allow this coastline to become flooded. So we're going to have a look at an example of it, not very far away from us, in a place called Medmery, which is just kind of beyond Chichester, between Chichester and Portsmouth. It's the largest managed realignment scheme in the whole of the UK, and it happened in West Sussex, and they started it in 2014. So the old sea defences have been breached along this bit of coastline to allow seawater to flood the land to the left and create new salt marshes. So this whole area here has been allowed to be flooded by these new holes. So the coastline is now 2 kilometres inland to where it used to be. So they've allowed 2 kilometres of land to be flooded. The seawall has now been completely destroyed to allow the land to flood, and a new seawall has been built further inland to make sure that the area behind it is now protected. Overall, this cost £28 million, and there were farmers, there were landowners, there were houses that were lost. The people would have been moved, but people did lose a lot from this. Not a lot of people though, but in order to kind of act as a natural protection to this settlement further along, they decided that the benefit of it outweighed the cost. So there were a wide range of views on this. Obviously there were a lot of people who were very for it and a lot of people who were very against it. So what I want you to do is make a copy of this table here, which has got 4 different stakeholders. So we've got a local resident, a local farmer, someone who owned the local leisure holiday home site, and then people who live in Somerset, who nowhere near this, but people who live in Somerset who were really affected by lots and lots of flooding over the years. And what I would like you to do is decide for each of these stakeholders whether they are for or against this managed realignment and why. Now you won't be able to do this without page 159 in the EduCast textbook. So please go to your electronic textbook and find this page and fill in this table for me. Okay, so I'll quickly go through these. So Ben Cooper, our local resident, he was very against the scheme because he obviously lost his home. Quite a lot of people lost their homes. So they were worried that was the money worth people losing their homes. And the local farmers were very, very similar because they had a lot of very productive farmland in this area. And that farmland's now been lost, so people have lost their livelihoods. There's a lack of income coming from that local economy. But in terms of the holiday leisure village, they're really, really happy about it. It's good for them because this new salt marsh and the new nature reserve is attracting a huge amount of new tourists. And they've also created a new fishery behind in the new estuary. And again, that's attracting new people to come and stay at the holiday village. But the Somerset residents, again, this is a bit of a random one, but hey ho, they're very against it because they think that that money should be spent to protect them. Because there is quite a limited pot of money that is spent on protecting coastlines. So people in other parts of the country think, why are you protecting them and not protecting us? So there's a wide range of views as to what would be the best way to manage a coastline. But in the end, you have to kind of trust that the experts have weighed up the benefits of it. So the last thing I want you to do is have a go at planning an 8-mark question. You're not going to answer it, but I want you to have a go at planning it. So the question is, it is not worth spending millions of pounds on protecting coasts. How far do you agree with this statement? So the structure for your plan is already there. So obviously at the beginning, you have to give your overall judgment. So how far do you agree or disagree with this statement? Give a percentage. So just write, I agree or I disagree, and then a percentage. Then give a couple of bullet points for why you might agree. So why you think it is not worth spending millions of pounds. And then a couple of reasons why you might disagree. So why you think actually we should spend huge amounts of money. And then I want you to, in your conclusions, just a couple of sentences to recap your judgment with a reason. So why did you give this judgment? So overall, this is why I thought I agree X amount that we should not protect coastlines because. And a very quick kind of overall summing up. So have a go at this exam question and then we are done for today. Okay, Year 10, great work. So what you should have in your books today is a soft engineering definition. Soft engineering types that little match-up we did at the beginning. Managed realignment definition and the process of how they do it. The sand dune diagram, beach nourishment pros and cons, the groups who might be for and against coastal management, the views on managed realignment in Medmurray, and the 8-mark plan. Well done, Year 10, you lot are brilliant, and I'll see you all very, very soon.